This here is the Canadian. It is a legendary passenger train owned and operated by Via Rail in Canada, and today I'm taking it from downtown Vancouver, BC, 2 days and 2,500 kilometers away to Winnipeg, Manitoba. Like a lot of people in Canada this Christmas season, the train wasn't my first choice, but after the snowfall of the century here in Vancouver and the absolute incompetence out there by the Canadian Airlines, this journey begins right here in downtown Vancouver at Pacific Central Station. Hello and good morning from a very snowy, rarely snowy Pacific Central Station in downtown Vancouver. Pacific Central is the home of the Via Rail Canadian, the number 2 line heading east. Traditionally from Vancouver to Toronto, I'm heading on the number 2 east to Winnipeg. It's a 2.5-day journey. This journey starts now. Today I'm going to be going from Vancouver to Winnipeg on the Canadian. But the Canadian used to be the super transcontinental passenger train that ran from Vancouver to Montreal. And although this route hasn't been run in over 40 years from Vancouver to Montreal, it's still marked at the train station here in Jasper, Alberta, which we should arrive into tomorrow morning. But that is a big if we get there. Now the snowfall of the century here in Vancouver basically rendered my entire commute to the train station useless, so I did what any true prairie boy would do. I trekked 3.5 kilometers to the train station in snow. I checked in at Pacific Central Station, and I am boarding in economy class, which is Via's terminology for third class. And after I got myself situated, at around 3 p.m., we departed downtown Vancouver.
It is our pleasure to welcome you on board train number 2, the Canadian, on route to Kamloops North, Jasper, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and final destination Toronto.
Now, it was about 12 hours later that we would arrive into Kamloops, BC for our first stop of the trip. Now, I usually get out at every stop and try to stretch the legs, but it was minus 25 Celsius tonight, so I basically went back to bed, and when I woke up around 5 a.m., we were just a few hours outside of Jasper, Alberta, which, in case you can't tell, is easily my favorite part of the trip. It's like Banff, but significantly less commercialized, home to lots of wildlife that wander into town daily, and not to mention that I was able to spend some time skating in Jasper a few years ago on a truly magical trip to skate in the mountains. And that trip also I did take on the Canadian to get there. Now, since November of 2020, when Via brought the Canadian back into service, I've taken this route 5 times. And although this is going to be my 6th trip, I have not been able to step foot into the glass observation dome cars to witness this journey from above the train. So we're just outside of Jasper National Park, and as you can see down here, it is free. It was like minus 50 here a couple days ago, as you can see. Winter wonderland at its finest. I know you're wondering, what exactly is that glass contraption? Well, I'm a functioning coffee junkie, to be honest with you, and the Via coffee, as I've documented in previous videos, is pretty bad. So I bring my own beans, my own grinder, my entire pour-over setup, and I get some hot water from the back, and I make my own coffee on board the train. 245. And I literally take this thing everywhere I go, whether it's rolling through the mountains of the Canadian, across Europe. I don't like to go anywhere without access to a good cup of joe. And to be honest, I almost did bring a griddle on the Canadian back in January of 2021 to make my own protein pancakes before Via brought back food options, but that's another story for another time. Thank you very much. This will be Jasper National Park. We arrived at Jasper National Park. Right behind me here is the Canadian number 1 heading west to Vancouver. Now, this one is actually extremely late. The other day, one of the Vias was 18 hours behind. It's minus 50 in Jasper. Air brakes froze. We got extremely delayed, but it is cool seeing the transcontinental train side by side. The number 2 and the number 1 in Jasper Heritage Station. And after that, we left Jasper and we got into easily my favorite part of the journey. Now, this is just outside the Brule Tunnel, and I will say I have never been in this area with sun or clear skies, but the whole winter wonderland vibe, especially a day before Christmas, it was beautiful and it was really doing it for me today. Now, later that night, we would arrive into Edmonton, Alberta, and you guessed it, it was freezing cold tonight. And maybe I've gotten soft from playing 2 years of professional hockey on the west coast of Sweden and had access to great weather, but I still thought tonight was freezing cold. And once we left the outskirts of Edmonton, it was bedtime. Now, with my economy class ticket, this means that this chair right here is my bed, and I'm not kidding. In third class, we don't get a bed, so I spend most of my time during the day in this dome car. It's a really relaxing environment. They weren't super busy on this trip, and to be honest, these chairs are really comfy. At night, we're not allowed to sleep up there, so I went back to my chair. Do I sleep great? Not at all. But I guess that's what happens when burst and sleeper tickets are so expensive. So expensive that my friend Frank and I decided to sneak into sleeper class to try to see what all the hype was about.
This is where all the first class people shower. We're not allowed in here. They keep the first and the third class separated. Remind us where we stand in the grand scheme of things.
After that, it was into the night and across the valleys and the plains of Saskatchewan until we arrived into our next stop at Saskatoon at around 7 a.m. Now, Saskatoon was, yep, you guessed it, freezing, and I spent maybe 30 seconds outside here, and then I went right back into that warm train car. Lots of people, they're not fans of the prairies, but this is where I was born and raised, and to be honest, I find there's something extremely soothing and relaxing about watching these fields 10 kilometers off in the distance pass by, and especially when we pick up speed and hit over 130 kilometers an hour across the prairies. So, wow. Welcome to the booming metropolis of Melville, Saskatchewan. Now, Melville was the final stop of this trip before we arrived in Winnipeg later tonight as the sun fades across the prairies and the plains of Manitoba approximately 6 hours later. So we arrived in Winnipeg 54 hours after our original departure from downtown Vancouver, and we would pull out of Winnipeg's Union Station before backing on the platform. But I think there's something so cool about this, because the dome cars gave some perspective on the historic Fort Garry Hotel you'll see in the background right here. And it was built in tandem with Winnipeg's Union Station to offer a chateau-style stay to long-distance travelers over a century ago when they were opened in 1913. This was the same experience that passengers on the Dominion in the 1930s got, the Transcontinental in the 1950s, and now in 2023, as I get to experience this on board today's version of the Canadian, into the historic Winnipeg Union Station. So 2 days, 5 hours, Vancouver across Winnipeg. That's the trip. Now, was the food on board the train good? Not really. Via has done away with the option for economy class peasants like myself to order any real meals and get only reheatable microwavable meals that resemble more prison food than anything nutritious when you're in third class. I also spent $500 in this last minute economy ticket, which actually cost me more than what a sleeper deal on Via's website would have been, because they offer 50% off on long distance travel if you book it in advance. So next time I'm going to be traveling in a berth sleeper for $450 when I go back to Vancouver in 3 weeks. It also includes 3 meals a day, a real bed, 24/7 shower access, which is great, but I just wish the train was more affordable to the average person like myself. I wish the food was better, and I wish the journey was a little bit more convenient. All the stops and delays along the way, I'd like to think that you can complete the journey in 36 hours to Vancouver. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Have you taken the Canadian before? Do you agree with my experience? Hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed this travel vlog, because I do lots more just like this whenever I travel for my full-time profession, which is professional hockey. I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.